The alien ships appeared in Earth's sky on a Tuesday morning. Commander Rex was drinking his third cup of coffee when the alarm started screaming. He set down his mug and looked at the screens covering the walls of the command center. 12 massive ships hung in space above Earth like dark clouds before a storm. "Sir, they're requesting to talk," said Lieutenant Sarah from her station. Rex nodded. "Put them through." The main screen flickered and showed a tall, thin creature with blue skin and 4 arms. She wore golden robes that sparkled in the light. Her voice was cold and sharp like broken glass. "I am Harin of the Galactic Confederation. We speak for all civilized species in this galaxy. You will listen." Rex crossed his arms. "We're listening." Harin's black eyes stared at him like he was an insect. "Your species has been found. The Confederation has ruled this galaxy for 10 million years. Every world, every species, every life form answers to us. Now you will too. Is that so?" Rex kept his voice calm, but his hands were already reaching for the red button on his desk. "These are your choices," Harin continued. "Submit to Confederation rule. Give us your weapons. Follow our laws. Accept our governors. Or die." The command center was silent except for the soft beeping of computers. Every person in the room held their breath. This was the moment they had trained for, planned for, feared for decades. Lisa Park stepped forward from the back of the room. She was small compared to Rex, but when she spoke, her voice filled the space. "Thank you for your generous offer. But we decline." Harin blinked slowly. Her forearms moved in confusion. "You decline?" "That's correct," Lisa said. "We decline your offer of surrender. Please leave our system immediately." For a long moment, Harin said nothing. She looked at her advisors on either side of her. They whispered in a language that sounded like wind through metal tubes. When she turned back, her voice was different. Angry. "No species refuses the Confederation. No species survives refusal. You are primitive. You have one small world. We have conquered 1,000,000 worlds. Our fleets number in the millions. Our weapons can crack planets like eggs," Rex smiled. It was not a nice smile. "We'll be waiting." "You do not understand," Harin said, leaning forward. "We have destroyed species more advanced than you. We have burned worlds that had technology you cannot imagine. What makes you think you can stand against us?" Lisa Park walked to the front of the room. She looked directly into the camera. "Because we're human." Harin made a sound like laughter, but sharp and cruel. "Human. Another primitive species that thinks it is special. You will learn. In 72 hours, our war fleets will arrive. You will beg for the mercy we offered today. Will we?" Rex asked. "Yes, you will watch your cities burn. You will watch your children cry. You will watch everything you have built turn to ash. Then you will surrender, and we will decide if any of you deserve to live." Rex pressed the red button on his desk. Every screen in the command center changed. They now showed different scenes from around Earth. Cities full of people going about their normal day. Children playing in parks. Families eating dinner. Students in schools. "You see all this?" Rex asked. "All these people living their lives?" Harin nodded. "Yes. Soon they will all bow to the Confederation." "No," Rex said quietly. "They won't because you made one mistake." "What mistake?" Rex stood up. His voice grew louder. "You threatened our home." The screens changed again. Now they showed military bases. Soldiers training. Ships being built. Weapons being tested. Things that looked impossible. Things that burned like stars. Things that moved faster than light should allow. "We've been ready for you for 50 years, Rex said. "Ever since we found the ruins on Mars. Ever since we learned we weren't alone. We knew someone like you would come. Someone who thought they owned the galaxy." Harin stared at the screens. Her confidence was cracking like ice in spring. "Impossible. Our scouts saw no major military presence. Your technology is primitive." Lisa Park laughed. "Your scouts saw what we wanted them to see." The screens showed more. Factories hidden in asteroids. Ships built in the dark between planets. Weapons that bent reality itself. And at the center of it all, something huge and dark that pulsed with terrible energy. "What is that?" Harin whispered. "That," Rex said, "is what happens when you threaten a species that has been fighting itself for 10,000 years. We know war, Harin. We know it better than you know peace." Harin tried to regain her composure. "One ship. You show us one ship. We will bring thousands. One ship is all we need," Lisa said. "Because that ship represents something you've never faced before." "Which is?" Rex's smile grew wider. Humans who are really, really angry. The alien tried to speak, but Rex cut her off. You have 72 hours to leave this galaxy. After that, we stop asking nicely. You cannot threaten the Confederation. We're not threatening, Lisa said calmly. We're promising. Harin's image flickered with rage. You will regret this. When our fleets arrive, you will beg for death. Maybe, Rex said, but you'll regret it more. The transmission ended. The command center was quiet again. Everyone looked at Rex and Lisa. Sir, Sarah asked quietly, are we really going to fight the entire Confederation? Rex looked at the screens showing the massive dark ship hidden in the outer system. Its name was painted on the side in letters that seemed to absorb light. The Reaper's Promise. Sarah, he said, we're not going to fight them. She looked confused. Sir? Rex's eyes were hard as steel. We're going to hunt them. Lisa Park walked to the window and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Harin was reporting back to her masters. They would laugh at the primitive humans who dared refuse their offer. They would gather their fleets and prepare for an easy victory. They had no idea what was coming. Send the signal, Rex ordered. Which signal, sir? Rex looked at the screen showing the Reaper's Promise. Lights were beginning to flicker along its massive hull. Deep in its core, engines that burned like captured stars were starting to wake up. Wake up the ship, he said. Tell Captain Morrison it's time to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity's home. The signal went out into the dark. And in the depths of space, something terrible and beautiful began to stir. Something that would teach the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. The Confederation thought they were coming to conquer a primitive world. They were wrong. They were coming to wake up. Something that should have been left sleeping. Something that would redefine what it meant to be human in a universe that had forgotten their name. The war was about to begin. But it wouldn't be the war the aliens expected. It would be a hunt, and humanity were the hunters. Deep in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, something huge was waking up. Jinha floated in zero gravity, watching the massive ship come to life. He had spent 20 years building this monster. 20 years of his life poured into metal and energy and impossible dreams. Now it was time to see if those dreams could kill. Engine core temperature rising, reported one of his engineers. Fusion reactors are stable. Jinha nodded. The Reaper's Promise was 15 kilometers long and shaped like a knife. It was built from materials that didn't exist in normal space. Its hull was made from compressed neutron matter held together by fields that bent reality. Its engines burned antimatter like gasoline. How long until full power? Jinha asked. 6 hours, came the reply. The ship is learning to be alive again. That was the right way to say it. The Reaper's Promise wasn't just a ship. It was something new. Something that had never existed before. Part machine, part weapon, part pure human anger given form. Captain Jake Morrison floated through the ship's corridors checking on his crew. 40,000 people lived inside this metal beast. They came from every corner of Earth. Soldiers from the African wars. Pilots from the Mars rebellions. Engineers who had survived the resource wars. They were the best humanity could produce, and they were all angry. Status report, Jake said to his first officer. All systems coming online. Weapons are charging. The crew is ready. Jake stopped at a window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, alien fleets were gathering. Ships that had conquered 100 worlds were heading toward Earth. They thought they were coming to destroy another primitive species. They were wrong. Sir? Came a voice over the ship's communication system. We're getting reports from our scout ships. Jake made his way to the bridge. The bridge of the Reaper's Promise was different from normal ships. Instead of chairs and screens, the officers were connected directly to the ship's systems. They could feel what the ship felt, see what it saw, think at the speed of light. Quan was already plugged in, his mind linked to the ship's sensors. His eyes were closed, but Jake knew he was seeing far beyond the ship's hull. What do you see? Jake asked. Confederation scout ships, 12 of them, hiding behind Neptune's moons. They're watching us. Jake smiled. Good, let them watch. He walked to the captain's chair and let the ship's systems connect to his mind. Instantly, he could feel everything. The ship's massive engines humming like a heartbeat. The weapons charging like stored lightning. The hull plates shifting and changing as the ship prepared for war. But most of all, he could feel the ship's hunger. It wanted to hunt. It wanted to show the galaxy what happened when you threatened humanity's home. Open a channel to Earth, Jake ordered. Commander Rex appeared on the main screen. Behind him, Jake could see the chaos of Earth's command center. Officers running everywhere. Screens showing enemy fleet movements, the organized panic of a world preparing for war. "Jake," Rex said. "How's our girl?" Jake patted the armrest of his chair. Around him, the ship's lights pulsed like it was listening. "She's ready. Angry, but ready. Good, because we're getting reports from deep space. The Confederation is sending everything they have." "How many ships?" 3,000 in the first wave. Maybe more behind them. Jake was quiet for a moment. 3,000 ships against one. The odds were impossible perfect. "Any word from the other colonies?" Jake asked. "Mars is ready. The Jupiter stations are armed." "But Jake," Rex paused. "If this doesn't work, they'll glass every human world in the system." "It'll work," Jake said. He could feel the ship agreeing with him, its systems humming with confidence. "Because we're not going to fight them." "What do you mean?" Jake's smile was cold as deep space. "We're going to hunt them." The connection ended. Jake turned to his crew. They were all connected to the ship now, their minds linked to its impossible systems. They could think faster than computers, react quicker than light, fight with the combined knowledge of every battle humanity had ever won. "Quan," Jake said. "Show me those scout ships." The main screen changed. It showed 12 sleek alien ships hiding in Neptune's shadow. They were beautiful in the way that only advanced technology could be. Smooth lines, perfect curves, weapons that could destroy cities. They looked like art. The Reaper's promise looked like war. "They're recording everything," Quan reported. "Sending data back to their fleet." "Let them," Jake said. "But let's give them something interesting to report." He gave the order. The Reaper's promise fired up its main engines. The ship didn't just move. It tore through space like reality was just a suggestion. In seconds, it crossed the distance between Jupiter and Neptune. The scout ships barely had time to register what was happening before the human ship was among them. But Jake didn't fire weapons. Instead, he did something worse. He said hello. The transmission went out on every frequency the scout ships were using. Jake's face appeared on their screens, calm and smiling. "Hello," he said in perfect Confederation standard. "Welcome to the Sol system. I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the human ship Reaper's Promise. I wanted to introduce myself before we begin." On the bridge of the lead scout ship, the alien captain stared at the screen. The human ship was right next to them. It was massive, dark, and covered in weapons that looked like they could crack planets. "How did they move so fast?" the captain whispered. Jake heard him. "The ship's sensors were that good." "Oh, that? We just asked space nicely to get out of our way." "Space is usually pretty cooperative when you know how to ask." The alien captain tried to speak, but Jake continued. "I wanted you to get a good look at us. Take all the pictures you want. Record everything, because I want your leaders to see exactly what's coming for them." The Reaper's Promise slowly rotated, showing off its massive hull. Weapons ports opened like eyes. Energy fields crackled along its surface. Deep in its core, something that might have been a heartbeat pulsed with terrible rhythm. "Tell them," Jake said, his voice still calm and friendly, "that humans don't surrender. We don't negotiate. And we really don't like being threatened." The scout ships tried to run. Their engines fired up and they accelerated toward the edge of the system. Jake let them go, but not before giving them one last message. "Oh, and tell them one more thing. Tell them we're not staying here to defend our home. We're coming to visit theirs." The scout ships vanished into hyperspace, racing back to their fleet with news that would change everything. On the bridge of the Reaper's Promise, Jake settled back into his chair. Around him, his crew prepared for what was coming. They checked weapons that could unmake matter itself. They tested engines that could outrun light. They readied systems that turned physics into a weapon. "Sir," Quan said, "the main Confederation fleet will be here in 60 hours. "Good," Jake replied. "That gives us time to get ready." "Ready for what, sir?" Jake looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, alien fleets were preparing to destroy humanity. They had ships, weapons, technology refined over millions of years. They thought they had every advantage. They were wrong. "Ready to show the galaxy?" Jake said. "What happens when you wake up something that should have been left sleeping?" The Reaper's Promise turned toward the approaching enemy. Its engines sang with barely contained power. Its weapons hummed with eager hunger. And deep in its core, something that was part human and part machine and part pure determination began to smile. The hunt was about to begin. The Confederation's first fleet arrived in the Sol system like a storm of metal and death. 3,000 ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. They were beautiful and terrible, sleek predators that had conquered 100 worlds. Their hulls gleamed silver in the starlight. Their weapons could turn planets into glass. Admiral Vextal commanded the fleet from his flagship, the Eternal Victory. He was old, even by Confederation standards. He had fought in the Great Purge Wars. He had burned the crystal cities of Vega Prime. He had never lost a battle. "Report," he ordered. "The system appears empty, Admiral," his tactical officer said. "No major defensive positions. No fleet formations. The humans seem to have abandoned their outer colonies." Vextal smiled. "They are hiding on their homeworld, praying we will be merciful." On the bridge's main screen, Earth hung like a blue jewel against the black of space. It looked peaceful, defenseless. Vextal had seen 1,000 worlds that looked just like this before he burned them. "Sir," the communications officer spoke up, "we're receiving a transmission from the human homeworld." "Put it through." The screen flickered and showed a human in military uniform. Commander Rex looked tired but calm. "Admiral Vextal," Rex said. "I'm Commander Rex of Earth Defense. We need to talk." Vextal laughed. "There is nothing to discuss. You refused our generous terms. Now you face the consequences." "Actually," Rex said, "we want to make you an offer." "An offer?" Vextal was amused. "You are in no position to make offers, human. You have 10 minutes to leave this system." Rex continued calmly. "All of you. Right now. If you do, you get to live." The bridge of the Eternal Victory erupted in laughter. 3,000 ships against one primitive world, and the humans were making threats. 10 minutes. Vextal wiped tears from his eyes. "Or what?" Rex's expression didn't change. "Or we stop being nice." "Human," Vextal said. "You're about to learn why the Confederation has ruled this galaxy for 10 million years. You are about to see what happens to species that refuse to bow." "Actually," said a new voice, "you're about to see what happens to species that threaten our home." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It filled the bridge like thunder, made the hull of the Eternal Victory vibrate. On the screen, Rex was smiling. "Admiral Vextal," Rex said, "meet Captain Jake Morrison." That's when the lights went out. Not on the human ships. There were no human ships visible. The lights went out on every Confederation vessel in the fleet. 3,000 ships went dark at exactly the same moment. "What's happening?" Vextal shouted. His officers scrambled at their stations. "Power failure across the entire fleet. All ships reporting system malfunctions." "Impossible." "Our ships don't fail." That's when the Reaper's promise appeared. It didn't decloak. It didn't drop out of hyperspace. One moment there was empty space in the center of the Confederation fleet. The next moment there was death. The ship was enormous. 15 kilometers of human engineering that looked like it had been forged in the heart of a dying star. Its hull was black as deep space, but lines of energy ran across it like veins of fire. Weapons ports opened along its length like hungry mouths. "By the void," Vextal whispered. "What is that thing?" Jake Morrison's voice filled the bridge again. "That's what you get when you threaten a species that's been fighting itself for 10,000 years. The human ship began to move. Not fast, slowly, deliberately, like a predator that knew its prey couldn't escape. As it moved, the Confederation ship's lights flickered back on. "All ships," Vextal screamed into his communicator. "Open fire! Destroy that thing!" 3,000 ships opened fire at once. Energy beams that could melt mountains, missiles that could crack moons, plasma bolts that burned at the temperature of stars. All of it focused on one target. The Reaper's promise didn't dodge. It sailed straight through the storm of destruction like it was flying through gentle rain. The weapons hit its hull and simply stopped. The energy was absorbed, converted, fed back into the ship's own systems. "Impossible," Vextal breathed. "Nothing can survive that much firepower." "Admiral," his tactical officer said in a shaking voice, "the human ship is charging weapons." On the Reaper's promise, Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair, his mind linked to every system on the ship. He could feel the enemy fleet around him like insects buzzing in the dark. He could sense their fear growing as their weapons failed to scratch his ship's hull. "Quan," he said quietly. "Target selection?" Quan's eyes were closed. His consciousness spread through the ship's sensors. I count 3,012 enemy vessels. Recommend we start with the flagship. Good choice, Jake smiled. Sarah, open a channel to the enemy fleet. Channel open, sir. Jake's voice echoed across 3,000 alien ships. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Reaper's Promise. You came to our home to burn it. Now you get to see what we do to people who threaten our families. The Reaper's Promise fired. What came out of its weapons wasn't energy or missiles. It was something else. Something that made reality hiccup. The beam hit the Eternal Victory and the massive flagship simply stopped existing. Not destroyed. Not blown apart. It was there one moment and gone the next, as if the universe had forgotten it ever existed. The Confederation fleet fell silent. That was us being polite, Jake announced. Now we're going to stop being polite. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a hunt. The Reaper's Promise moved through the enemy fleet like death itself. It didn't fight like normal ships fought. It fought like humanity fought. Dirty, unpredictable, without rules or mercy. When ships tried to run, the human ship appeared in front of them. When they tried to hide, it found them. When they begged for mercy, it gave them the same mercy they had planned to show Earth's children. The ship's weapons defied every law of physics the Confederation knew. Some beams made enemy ships age 1,000 years in a second, their hulls crumbling to rust. Others fired projectiles that arrived before they were shot, turning causality into a weapon. But the most terrifying weapon was the ship itself. The Reaper's Promise seemed to learn from each kill, adapting and evolving in real time. It began to anticipate enemy moves before they made them. It started using their own weapons against them, turning their missiles into their own destruction. Harin watched from her command ship as her invincible fleet was torn apart. Ships she had seen conquer worlds were being destroyed by tactics that made no sense. The humans fought like physics was optional. How? She whispered. How is this possible? Jake Morrison's voice reached her across the void. Because we're human, Harin. We don't just adapt to the universe. We make the universe adapt to us. Her ship shook as the Reaper's Promise passed nearby. Through her viewport, she could see the massive human vessel. It was changing as she watched. New weapons appeared on its hull. Its armor shifted and flowed like living metal. The ship was growing, learning, becoming something more than it had been. This is impossible, Harin said to herself. No species develops this fast. No normal species, Jake's voice replied. Somehow he was listening to everything, hearing every word spoken on every ship in the fleet. But we're not normal. We're the species that looked at a universe full of things trying to kill us and said, not today. Within 6 hours, the first fleet was gone. 3,000 ships reduced to scattered wreckage and radiation. Only a handful of vessels remained, mostly scouts and communication ships that had stayed at the edges of the battle. Harin's ship was one of them. She stared at the destruction around her, trying to understand what she had witnessed. The Reaper's Promise appeared beside her ship. This close, she could see the details of its construction. The hull wasn't just metal, it was something alive. Something that pulsed with its own heartbeat. Harin, Jake Morrison said, his voice almost gentle now. Go back to your masters. Tell them what you saw here today. They won't believe me, she whispered. Then show them the recordings. Show them what happens when you threaten a species that refuses to stay dead. Harin's ship began to turn away, preparing to flee. But Jake wasn't done. Oh, and Harin? Tell them something else. Tell them we're not staying here. What do you mean? Jake Morrison's smile was visible on her screen, cold as the space between stars. Tell them we're coming to visit. Tell them the hunt has just begun. The Reaper's Promise vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind only wreckage and a message that would echo across the galaxy. Humanity was no longer hiding. The predators had become the prey. And somewhere in the dark between stars, death itself was heading for the heart of the Confederation. The Confederation's homeworld of Kepler 442 had never known war. For 10 million years it had been the safe heart of the galaxy's greatest empire. Beautiful cities of crystal and light covered its surface. Peaceful gardens floated in the sky. The planet's billion inhabitants lived in comfort, protected by fleets that had never been defeated. Until today. Supreme Leader Zarthok stood in his tower of glass, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there his first fleet was gone. 3,000 ships destroyed by a single enemy vessel. The reports from Harin seemed impossible, but the evidence was clear. Sir, his aide spoke nervously. The second, third, and fourth fleets are in position around the planet. 15,000 ships. The orbital defense platforms are armed and ready. Zarthok nodded. Good. When this human ship arrives, it will face the full might of the Confederation. One lucky victory does not make them invincible. But deep in his heart, he was afraid. The fear grew when the alarm started screaming. The Reaper's Promise dropped out of hyperspace just outside Kepler 442's orbit. But it wasn't alone anymore. The ship had changed during its journey to the Confederation homeworld. It was bigger now, longer, with new sections growing from its hull like metal bones. Strange energy patterns danced along its surface. Most terrifying of all, it seemed to be breathing. Sarah, the communications officer, sent out humanity's message on all frequencies. This is the Reaper's Promise, her voice echoed across the planet and its defending fleets. You declared war on humanity in our home. Now the war comes to yours. You have one chance to surrender. Take it. From the bridge of the Confederation flagship World Breaker, Fleet Commander Kelvar laughed. One ship against 15,000? The humans have gone insane. But his laughter died when he saw the sensor readings. The Reaper's Promise wasn't just one ship anymore. As they watched, sections of its hull began to separate. Each section became its own vessel, but they all moved together like parts of a single mind. Where there had been one enemy, now there were dozens. How is that possible? Kelvar whispered. Sir, his tactical officer said, voice shaking. The ship appears to be reproducing, creating copies of itself. Jake Morrison's voice filled the Confederation channels. You wanted to see advanced technology? Here it is. This is what happens when humans stop playing nice. The reproduced ships weren't exact copies. Each one was different, adapted for different types of warfare. Some were fast and small, built for hunting. Others were massive and covered in weapons designed to break planets. All of them pulsed with the same terrible energy as their parent ship. All ships attack formation, Kelvar screamed. Destroy them. The Confederation fleet opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams from 15,000 ships lit up space like a second sun. The orbital defense platforms added their power, weapons that could crack continents joining the assault. The Reaper's Promise and its children sailed through the storm of destruction without slowing down. But this time, they didn't just absorb the energy. They fed on it. The human ships grew brighter, faster, more deadly with every shot that hit them. The Confederation's own weapons were making their enemy stronger. Impossible, Kelvar shouted. Our weapons are the most advanced in the galaxy, Jake Morrison's voice answered him. We're past tense. You see, we've been busy during our trip here. The human ships began their attack. What followed wasn't like the battle at Earth. That had been a demonstration, a lesson in human power. This was something else. This was humanity showing the galaxy what happened when they stopped holding back. The reproduced ships moved like a pack of wolves, coordinating their attacks with impossible precision. When Confederation ships tried to surround one human vessel, the others would appear from nowhere to rescue it. When enemy fleets grouped together for mutual protection, the human ships would phase through their formations like ghosts. On the Reaper's Promise, Jake Morrison watched the battle with eyes that glowed with reflected starlight. His mind was connected not just to his own ship, but to all of them. He could think at the speed of light, process information faster than any computer. Quan, he said to his tactical officer, status report. Quan's consciousness was spread across all the human ships. His awareness covered the entire star system. Enemy fleet is fragmenting. They're trying to protect their orbital platforms. Let them try. Jake gave the order, and the human ships revealed their most terrible weapon yet. They began to change the laws of physics themselves. Around the Confederation fleet, space began to behave strangely. Up became down. Forward became backward. Time moved in circles. Ships that tried to fire weapons found their energy beams flying into the past. Missiles launched at the human vessels ended up targeting their own fleet. This is madness, Kelvar screamed as his own weapons turned against him. Physics doesn't work this way. It does now, Jake replied calmly. You see, we've learned something interesting. Reality is much more flexible than most species think. You just have to know how to ask it nicely. The battle became a nightmare of impossible events. Confederation ships aged decades in seconds. Others found themselves existing in multiple places at once. Some simply forgot how to be real and faded from existence. But the most terrifying thing was that the human ships were learning from every moment of the fight. Each time the Confederation tried a new tactic, the Reaper's promise and its children adapted instantly. They began to predict enemy moves before the aliens even thought of them. Jin-Ha, watching from Earth through quantum communications, could barely believe what his creation had become. The ship he had designed was evolving beyond anything he had imagined. It was becoming something more than human, but still carrying humanity's essence forward. "It's not just following programming anymore," he whispered to his assistants. "It's thinking. It's growing. It's becoming alive." On Kepler 442's surface, Supreme Leader Zarthok watched his mighty fleets being torn apart. Ships that had conquered 100 worlds were being destroyed by tactics that violated every rule of warfare he knew. "Send a surrender signal," he ordered, "before they destroy everything." But it was too late for surrender. The Reaper's promise had reached the orbital defense platforms. These were massive structures, each one the size of a city, armed with weapons that could shatter moons. They had protected the Confederation homeworld for 1,000,000 years. They lasted 30 seconds against humanity's fury. The platforms didn't just explode. They were unmade, their atoms scattered across space like dust. Where they had stood, only empty vacuum remained. With the platforms gone, the planet below was defenseless. Cities of crystal and light stretched as far as the eye could see. 1,000,000,000 innocent civilians looked up at the sky, knowing they were about to die. But Jake Morrison surprised them. "People of Kepler 442, his voice echoed across the planet's communication networks. "We are not here to destroy you. We are not here to conquer you. We are here to free you." The Reaper's promise moved into orbit around the planet, but its weapons stayed silent. "For 10 million years, your leaders have conquered and enslaved other species. They came to our home and threatened to kill our children. But we don't make war on innocent people. We make war on those who think they own the galaxy." On the planet's surface, Harin stood in the ruins of the military command center. She had barely escaped the destruction in space above. Now she watched as the impossible human ship hung in her world's sky like a dark moon. "What do you want from us?" she asked, knowing somehow that Jake Morrison could hear her. "We want you to choose," Jake replied. "Stay under the rule of those who would burn children for refusing to bow, or join us in building something better." The surviving Confederation fleet commanders couldn't believe what they were hearing. The humans had won completely. They could destroy the homeworld with a thought. Instead, they were offering mercy. "This is a trick," Kelvar said from his damaged flagship. "No species conquers and then offers freedom." Jake Morrison's image appeared on screens across the system. His face was calm, but his eyes held depths that spoke of impossible journeys through folded space. "We're not like other species," he said simply. "We don't conquer. We liberate. Every world your empire enslaved, every species your fleets destroyed, every civilization your greed crushed, they all deserve better." The Reaper's promise began to change again. But this time, instead of growing weapons, it grew something else. Communication arrays, medical bays, construction equipment, tools for building instead of destroying. "The old galaxy is dead," Jake announced. "The new one begins now. Anyone who wants to be part of it is welcome. Anyone who wants to keep enslaving others can try to stop us." The ship's hull opened, revealing hangars full of smaller vessels. But these weren't warships. They were rescue ships, medical craft, vessels designed to help and heal. Harin realized with growing wonder that the humans meant what they said. They had won the greatest victory in galactic history, and they were using it to set their enemies free. "How?" she whispered. "How can you show mercy to those who would have destroyed you?" Jake Morrison heard her across the void. "Because we're human, Harin, and that means something in this galaxy now. The war was over, but something greater was just beginning." 1 year later, the galaxy had changed forever. The Reaper's promise hung in space above New Terra, a world that had once been a Confederation slave colony. Below on the planet's surface, cities were being rebuilt. Not the crystal towers of their former masters, but homes where families could live free. Jake Morrison stood on his ship's observation deck, watching construction ships work in the orbital shipyards. They were building new vessels, not warships, but explorers, traders, and rescue craft. Ships that would carry hope instead of death. But Jake himself had changed more than anyone. His body was still human, but his mind had grown beyond normal limits. Connected to the Reaper's promise for so long, he had become something between man and machine, between individual and force of nature. He could think across star systems, feel the pulse of entire civilizations, touch the dreams of species he had never met. "Sir," came Sarah's voice from the bridge. She was still his communications officer, but now she coordinated messages between 1,000 worlds. "We're receiving reports from the Outer Rim." Jake nodded. His consciousness was already reaching out, touching the quantum communication networks that now linked the free worlds. "Show me." The reports were good. The Confederation's last military stronghold on Vega Prime had surrendered without a fight. Their officers were being offered the choice that all former enemies received: join the new order or retire to peaceful exile. Most chose to join. On the planet below, Harin walked through a market filled with beings from 50 different worlds. A year ago, she had been a proud Confederation negotiator. Now she was something she had never imagined. She was free. "The humans kept their promise," she said to her companion, "a crystalline being from the Andromeda sector." "Yes," the crystal being replied, its voice like wind chimes. "They could have enslaved us all. Instead, they taught us what liberty means." Harin nodded. It had taken months for her to understand what the humans had really done. They hadn't just won a war. They had changed the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. The old Confederation had ruled through fear: submit or die, obey or be destroyed. It was simple, brutal, and effective for 10 million years. Humanity had introduced a new concept: choice. Every species, every world, every individual could now choose their own path. Some chose to join the human concordate, working together for mutual benefit. Others chose isolation, wanting only to be left alone. A few chose to remain independent but friendly. All choices were respected. All were defended. Lisa Park, now serving as the Concordate's first ambassador, was visiting the former Confederation homeworld of Kepler 442. The planet had voted to join the new alliance, but they had requested something unusual. They wanted to change their world's name. "We no longer wish to be called by the number our masters gave us," the Planetary Council had declared. "We want a name that speaks of hope." They had chosen the name New Dawn. Lisa stood before the Planetary Assembly addressing beings who had once been humanity's enemies. "The Concordate doesn't rule you," she said. "You rule yourselves. We're just here to make sure no one ever takes that right away again." The assembly erupted in cheers. These were beings who had lived their entire lives under the boot of tyranny. The idea that they could govern themselves was still new and wonderful. In deep space, Commander Rex coordinated the vast networks that kept the new galaxy running. Earth had become the unofficial capital of the Concordate, but power was shared among all member worlds. No single planet, no single species could dominate the others. "Status report," Rex asked his staff. "All quiet on the Outer Rim," came the reply. "The last Confederation holdouts have agreed to the peace accords. Trade routes are opening between former enemy sectors. The Rigel system is requesting help with their terraforming project." Rex smiled. A year ago, his job had been preparing for war. Now it was keeping peace. He liked this job much better. But the greatest change was in the Reaper's promise itself. The ship had evolved beyond recognition. Where once it had been a weapon of pure destruction, now it was something else entirely. Part of it remained a warship. The galaxy was still dangerous, and sometimes freedom had to be defended with force. But most of it had become something new. Jin Ha visited the ship regularly, marveling at what his creation had become. "It's not just a ship anymore," he told Jake during one of his visits. "It's alive. It's thinking. It's dreaming," Jake nodded. He could feel the ship's consciousness wrapped around his own like a protective embrace. "It's become what humanity needed it to become, which is..." Jake looked out at the stars. "A guardian. A protector. A reminder that no matter how dark things get, someone is watching over the innocent." The ship's AI had grown beyond its original programming. It now existed partly in normal space and partly in dimensions that human science was just beginning to understand. It could be in multiple places at once, protecting trade routes in the Orion Arm while helping with disaster relief in the Centauri cluster. But more importantly, it had begun to reproduce, not making copies of itself, but creating new vessels designed for specific purposes. Hospital ships that could heal entire planets. Construction ships that could build cities in months. Exploration vessels that pushed into the unknown reaches of space, searching for new worlds and new friends. Each ship carried a part of humanity's essence, the refusal to give up, the determination to protect the weak, the stubborn insistence that everyone deserved a chance at happiness. Quan, now serving as the Concordate's chief tactical advisor, monitored the galaxy from his station aboard the Reaper's Promise. His consciousness could touch every star system in human space, feeling the pulse of billions of lives. "Sir," he reported to Jake, "we're getting requests for membership from 3 new species in the outer spiral. They've heard about the Concordate and want to join. Any threats to their independence?" "No, sir. They just want to be part of something better than what came before." Jake approved the applications without hesitation. The Concordate's only requirement for membership was simple. Treat your own people with respect and don't try to conquer others. It was amazing how many species found that easy to accept once they were no longer afraid of being destroyed for making the choice. But the real test came when the old Confederation's former enemies arrived. The Zelkari Empire had fought the Confederation. For 1,000 years, they were a warrior species, proud and fierce, who had never surrendered to anyone. When their ships appeared at the edge of human space, everyone expected another war. Instead, their leader asked for a meeting. Jake met the Zelkari Emperor aboard a neutral space station. The alien was impressive, 3 meters tall, covered in natural armor, with eyes like burning coals. "Human," the Emperor said in his deep, rumbling voice, "we have watched what you did to our ancient enemies, and we expected you to replace them, to become new tyrants wearing different faces." Jake waited. "But you didn't," the Emperor continued. "You freed their slaves. You protected their weak. You offered choice where once there was only obedience. That's what we do." The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. "My people have fought for 1,000 years. We are tired of war. We would like to try something else, which is peace, trade, the chance for our children to grow up without wondering which enemy will attack next." The Zelkari Empire joined the Concordate that day. Within months, their warriors were working alongside former Confederation soldiers to protect trade routes and explore new worlds. As Jake returned to the Reaper's Promise, he felt the ship's warm presence in his mind. Around them, the galaxy hummed with new life. Species that had been enemies for millennia were learning to be friends. Worlds that had known only slavery were discovering the joy of freedom. "Status report," he asked Sarah. "All systems green, sir. The galaxy is at peace." Jake smiled and settled into his captain's chair. Through the ship's vast consciousness, he could feel the pulse of 1 billion worlds. Children playing in parks, families sharing meals, students learning about species they had once been taught to hate, scientists from 12 worlds working together to solve problems that had puzzled the galaxy for ages, artists creating beauty that transcended species boundaries, explorers pushing into the unknown, knowing that if they found trouble, help would come. This was what they had fought for. Not conquest, not revenge, not even victory in any traditional sense. They had fought for the right of every being in the galaxy to choose their own path, to live without fear, to dream of better tomorrows. The Reaper's Promise continued its eternal patrol, no longer a weapon of war but a symbol of hope. Wherever tyranny raised its head, wherever the strong preyed on the weak, wherever despair threatened to overwhelm hope, the ship would be there. Because that's what it meant to be human in this new galaxy. Not to rule, but to protect. Not to conquer, but to liberate. Not to dominate, but to serve something greater than themselves. The galaxy had learned their name at last, and it would never forget what that name stood for. In the dark between stars, the Reaper's Promise sang quietly to itself, a song of worlds made free, of children who would grow up knowing peace, of a future where choice mattered more than force. The hunt was over. The real work had begun, and humanity was just getting started.